Welcome back to Slaughtered Sheep. I'm your host, Matt Daly of MRD Consulting, and we are back for the third and final podcast with Ben Theis. Last podcast, we went through the startup wolves, the growth wolves, and the chaos wolves, and you gave some great examples of how you've navigated those wolves and kept Skoll in a sustainable business model through that process. Before we wrap up in this third podcast, the topics that I want to cover today are Ben's insight into AI that has to be front and center in your industry. We want to talk about some hype wolves out there that pose an ever-present threat to our small business sheep. There's rumors of $1 billion offer. So I want to move on. The feedback that you've been given has been phenomenal. But before we wrap up, there are a few critical topics that I want to cover that I know our audience is going to want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's jump into AI. Yep. ChatGPT. I'm going to throw a few things at you randomly from more of a layperson's perspective, and then you can chime in on somebody that I'm sure has a much more technical perspective on this. I look at AI as a tool. Absolutely fantastic tool, amazing tool, but the bottom line is it's a tool.
Yep.
It's no different than a skill saw.
Mm-hmm.
You put a skill saw in the hand of you and I, and we'll build a deck in our backyard. You put a skill saw in the hand of a 3-year-old, and something bad's going to happen.
Yep.
But I want to know from your perspective in your industry, give the users a glimpse as to how you guys have leveraged AI, how you've managed it as a competitive threat.
Mm-hmm. I love it. And honestly, it's the number one question we get. I usually tell people there's two things to look at AI, like specifically even in my industry. One is how you can utilize it as a tool. And then the other part is like how it's actually impacting algorithms or technology that's utilized inside the industry. I just gave an AI presentation last week, and I said how many times I started with it, had in the middle, and ended with it, is that AI is a tool, not a solution.
Yeah.
And no matter how much it gets, it's going to change the game. It already has, obviously. November is the 2-year anniversary of ChatGPT essentially being launched.
Okay.
And we've seen how much insanely that's grown within 2 years. But how we've utilized it is, it doesn't matter what industry in, you can obviously use it to, again, be more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
The things like when it comes to emails or lists, or even stuff like even simpler things of blog topics and keywords and stuff like that. But I tell people, though, the reason it's a tool, the best thing that you want to do is to take your human brain, your intuition, the skill, the gut feeling, all of that can't be computerized, but then take the efficiency and the modernization of that and then meld it together. Right. And that's what we ultimately like to do. But the thing is, there is an opportunity that we could overuse. For instance, when we go to the other side of admin tasks or just like that, when you actually talk about inside our like digital marketing realm, I could just have AI just do blog post, copy and paste, use it to help you get started and then be able to do it. It's vastly changed algorithms already, and like how Google is actually utilizing AI and how it's actually changing an algorithm to get different results, which then obviously we have to know in order to kind of change strategies, update strategies, or just know how to align with Google. Every industry out there can be utilizing it because there are certain things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis that could be streamlined or sped up with AI. But then also looking at how it's changing your industry, because it is changing everybody's industry from manufacturing hard goods to like a completely digital on a digital service-based kind of company, completely polar opposites of what we essentially do and what we offer and what we make, but all of it's being effective with AI. But I think instead of being scared about it, like that's what we're saying, is embracing it and utilizing it as a tool. Yes, it is going to change some industries, and most likely it's going to create probably new industries that aren't out there yet or new jobs. But we've seen this before with machinery or the internet. We've seen this in our lifetimes and just human history. And so I feel like it's no different than that. It makes for a better story, of course, and for fiction or nonfiction and stuff like that out there for the different movies and the TV shows and things like that.
Excellent answer, and not just because it's in line with my thought on it, but that's the biggest reason.
Yeah.
I have this argument with my adult boys. They're plugged into it, ChatGPT, pushing me hard. And it's one of those things where, and this is another challenge you have as a business. Let's talk about the hype wolf. Because the hype wolf is a dangerous wolf. And the hype wolves that are running around in the forest surrounding AI and ChatGPT are numerous. And that's the whole issue when this whole thing started to come about. I'm an auditor, I'm an accountant, I'm a businessman, and I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm a risk taker, but there's that side of me that is extremely skeptical. If I can't touch it, see it, smell it, it doesn't exist. And I think you've done a great job with this, peeling back the chaff, the hype, the Hollywood take on AI. We're all going to be replaced by robots, and dear God, we're going to be slaves to AI. It's not just that we're going to be replaced; they're going to own us, and that's obviously ridiculous. And I think you put a very fine point on it, very realistic, commonsensical narrative on it. That it's a tool, it's a powerful tool. It can be misused. It can be leaned upon too heavily. We haven't even talked about copyright, which is
correct. That's
huge. That was the first
copyright regulation, everything there. And unfortunately, we're in the middle of it where we don't have those answers. So and that's where skepticism, hypotheticals, all that start to come in, but we don't have the answers.
And the copyright thing, that's going to be litigated for years.
Oh,
it's going to take court cases, that precedents. I think there's going to be legislation that's going to have to deal with this because there's artists out there that their work is being.
Yes. I just think about it. You go back to Napster and Kazaa, like when we were just putting songs up there, and that was a huge deal. And obviously it was $1 billion settlement and stuff like that. Now you're talking about something that could actually make those by utilizing it. That's like that kind of thing on steroids.
Stephen King, I think, was the first one to just say that's enough because all these horror books were being written and he's reading them and this is my book.
Correct. Because it's always source material. And I think the biggest thing too that we also do with AI is someone like yourself thinks about it differently than your kids who grew up. And then you have me in the middle. And so there's also those different expectations. And I think the other reality too with it is that when we had something, even you could even say the internet or machineries, like these new advances, they were so much slower going. AI, like we've never had something like this go so fast. So don't be afraid of it. Strip away that hype. The amount of rabbit holes, the amount of distractions you can get, and every industry has hype. Like we can obviously have industry-specific ones, but this is like a worldwide one where it's very unique because you do need to learn it and have the understanding is probably the best word I would say, and implement it, but not to have, again, not go down this rabbit hole and have it do. It's figuring out how you can utilize it. At the end of the day, always mix your brain power with AI. That's what's going to give you the best results.
That is sage advice, and it's nice to hear it from somebody like you. So just a couple of more. I could probably ask you about 80 more questions. And you're that interesting, but I know that we got to wrap this podcast up at some point in time. We may have to do a part 2.
There we go.
But so just a couple of last questions for you. Ben, if I were to offer you $1 billion for school today, would you accept?
$1 billion? I might have to think about it at that point. Yeah, the B with an M maybe. Obviously, not going to lie, I would consider that. But the thing though too is, remember we talked about respect and purpose. No matter how much money you have, here's my thing is I work with a lot of former professional athletes. And the thing is, you can have all the money, but if you don't have a purpose, if it means removing that purpose, then no. But obviously the ideal world for every business owner is being able to meld those two kind of things together. And that's really what I think gets lost. I know it's so easy to say happiness and not money because even this year, some tougher economical times, a lot of people are getting stretched and stuff like that. And as I'm saying, it's so easy to sometimes just say that. But I think there is that point that is lost. And this is why you see a lot of these issues. And so my thing is the best of both worlds is to have that financial security with purpose. But I think that purpose is a huge thing that people don't always think about.
So I will say this, Ben, obviously my question was completely in jest. However, like every joke, there's always a little bit of truth. This question totally came out of the blue.
Oh, yes.
But I think your response speaks volumes just in the fact that, listen, I put this question on here just because I wanted more of a comical element to the show to see what your reaction would be. But you want to know something? What an eloquent answer. A capitalist. I operate MRD Consulting to make a profit. Period. I love serving my customers. I love leading my employees. But on the other hand, you make a great point that there also has to be, as a business owner, there has to be that kind of higher purpose side of it for you, meaning that my business absolutely gives me meaning. Just sitting here in this podcast, I've built this business up. I've built my reputation up enough where a guy like you is willing to sit down and give me your time. And this is satisfied just to be able to do this. And this has nothing to do with money. There's no compensation here for
Nope.
this. And this is just two guys sharing their thoughts on what it's like to lead a business. But that's part of what you're talking about. It's
Yep.
like,
That purpose.
it
Yeah.
gets me up in the morning, and I love my family and I love my God, but I'll tell you, I love running a business. And that's the point that you're making, is that it's not just about getting to the point where you can get bought out and take a deep breath. If you truly love this, you don't want to sell. You want to stay in it. And
Right.
so-
And I like to say full transparency. I've talked about this with family, friends, colleagues, or whatever. If money was truly it, sometimes small business ownership may not be, because you could sometimes working for someone like in sales.
Sure.
There's probably a lot of opportunities out there where
Very
you
good
could actually
point.
just maximize. If that's really what it is, you
Yeah.
can maximize more often than not. You can maximize that opportunity working for someone else in a good opportunity than the other way, because all the stuff that we're talking about that goes into this. Correct. You have less risk. A lot of
Yeah.
times you'll have a lot more timelines or like guardrails and all that kind of stuff, if that's all you want. But again, it makes the world go round. You need leaders and followers and everybody in between too on those to be able to make it. So
Okay, great answer to a absolute ridiculous question, but sometimes ridiculous questions bring out great answers. I really appreciate you sharing your childhood and some of the things that you overcame. And you got the scar tissue, Ben.
yeah,
I feel pretty good that the Wolves have met their match with Ben Theis. So,
I appreciate it. No, thank you for having me. And this was great. This is really fun talking about authentic. Is your business is you, and you are your kind of business. You have to have some delineation and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, that's where it's nice to weave through them, because that is authentic, is being able to do that. So I appreciate you having me on today. It was really fun kind of chatting. And like I said, hopefully we get to do a part 2 someday.
and I guess one last thing I want to say for our listeners, I've had great experience with Skoll, with my website, my kind of nascent social media campaigns. I haven't done much on it, but I just feel like I'm just absolutely protected against the wolves by your firm, and
Thank you.
it means a lot to me. So if you're looking for website development, social media management, marketing, somebody to give you some insight into AI, you got a good insight into who you're dealing with here. This guy's the real deal.
I really appreciate that. And honestly, I'd like to also say, if you just need a resource, I always like to tell people that we've worked with people that are already working with people, or just have a question, or if you want to come see a workshop or webinar, it doesn't always have to be a paid kind of relationship. Giving back, being authentic. So I always like to mention that to people. If you have a question, use this as a resource, use it as a connection. Of course, we'd love to work with you, me, or someone out there that's needing those actual services that we can come in, but it doesn't always have to be that way too.
Well, once again, that generous side of Ben coming shining through. I think we're going to sign off here, Ben, but I'm just going to say thank you one last time, and continue to work with your firm, and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Skoll.
Okay. Skoll. There we go. Bye.